Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing look at the current state of Black Ice for Hearts of Iron 4. And so far, I am enjoying it immensely so far. And I want to thank you all for joining me here. Now, the Spanish Civil War has broken out. And so we're going to be looking at the involvement of what's going on. But I want to give my quick, and it's going to be quick, version of what was going on. Spain, through multiple elections, was moving more and more left. There were death squads on both sides of the 1930s. There were reasonably well documented that some of the death squads were leftists that were policemen that would take off their uniforms and go kill some people and then come back and put their uniforms on and go investigate, well, who did the killings? Man, we just can't. Oh, it must be that guy over there. Go arrest him. So this was going on. This is, if you will, the precursors to the Civil War. It is a violent era. Now, in 1936, the Popular Front wins the elections. And like a lot of things, it's a coalition. So you get, that's why it's a Popular Front. It isn't the communists. It isn't the socialists. It isn't the social democrats or the anarchists. It's all of them. And so they have differing viewpoints. But it is a march to the left. Well, sort of my understanding is I basically former military general who's very popular, basically leader of the right, not fascist, but right wing of it, is Jose Calvo Sotelo. Sotelo. Okay, that's probably Sotelo, again with my Anglic accent. He is arrested in Madrid by the police, taken away in a police car. His body is found in the gutter on the street, on the side of the street in Madrid the next day. He's taken away at night. Does he even make it to the police station? I don't know if there's how detailed we know or suspect. He is assassinated by basically identifiable policemen, I believe, and not just people that somehow mysteriously found police uniforms and pretended to be police and showed it up. So he is assassinated by the government, but maybe by elements of the government, maybe even by elements of the government that are acting outside of control of, the government. Was this ordered by the chief of police of Madrid, or was this just, it wasn't just a few random police officers of the left-wing persuasion decided to go do this. No, this was organized by somebody very clearly. And, just who approved this, who approved the arresting, who approved if the arresting was ever real or, meant to sort of like, because Franco at this time was another popular general, but maybe not quite as popular. I don't quite know the popularity demographics of it, but Franco is sort of in internal exile out here in the Canary Islands and is staying out of politics. But Sotelo isn't. He is involved in politics, and I think basically retired general at this time, meaning I don't think he holds any official military commands. So he is killed. He is basically the head of the opposition front of various factions that are in Spain, of the shall we say right wing coalition, which, yes, includes phalangist, which is Spain's version of fascist, but also concerns traditional monarchists and people that were, very much involved, for religious reasons, whether they have a monarchy or not, and other sorts of, the right of politics, shall we say, and that can vary a bit. So he is assassinated, clearly by the government. Again, I don't, you could read, and I had to look up his name because I don't normally know it, so you could tell, but I wanted him to be remembered. He is assassinated. Well, this action, and there's a lot of conservatives in the military still, this action galvanizes the right-wing military types to do a coup against the government. So now you have a left, and you can go, well, Gamer, you're anti-leftist. Well, generally, yes, I am, generally. But you have, to the best of my knowledge, I'm also for due process. If you knew that this guy was committing crimes, and you could, put him up for trial. If you've got somebody who, he ordered me to go do some death squad work or something, well, you can't even do a show trial. They don't even go to the show trial point of dealing with this guy. So whether it would be a free and fair trial with no, person that's tortured and then, put on a uniform over his, burnt body, and then he goes and swears that this guy is the devil incarnate or something, meaning forced, they're not even forcing fake testimony on this guy, whether he is responsible for crimes. Oh, he was never in the military? I thought he was, folk. Okay, well, thank you for correcting me. But he's the head of the political opposition, and he is a conservative politician murdered by Republicans. July is what triggered. Yes. And so, I thought he was in the military. Sorry, I just quickly got the assassination name. It's been a long time. There's a really great, 12-part series in English on the Spanish Civil War that was done back in the 1970s. I've watched it a long time ago. I think it's all on YouTube if you want to watch it and get this stuff correctly. Thank you, folk. You do help a lot with that. Okay, so I do want to be corrected, but the main point is this is without any due process, even a sham of due process. He is killed by the government, not just even by a local paramilitary, local left-wing, whatever. He's killed by the government. So now we have a reign of leftist terror against a leading opposition figure. To me, to my way of looking at this, that is an illegitimate government. I mean, you can, if you think somebody's a danger to public, whatever, we can talk, I'm not talking about American politics because not everywhere is nice as American politics. We can talk about arresting somebody and putting them under house arrest. We can talk about, because I might, with some sort of radical leftist, communist, whatever, if we can't convict him of a crime, but he's pushing some revolution, again, outside of America where laws aren't quite as clean and clear as in America, Okay, so the government has done this act along with many other acts, again, like I say, at various levels of support of the government, a left-wing, and yes, there are right-wing terror groups too, but the left-wing ones are, they don't get honestly investigated by the government. The police and the civil jurisprudence within the country is not a neutral arbiter equally enforcing the law against right-wing and left-wing. They're enforcing it only against the right. And they're only going after the right. They're not going after the left-wing death squad. So this, to me, is intolerable. To have a government that is running death squads and arresting people unarmed, that you take into your police car and he dies trying to escape. No, that just doesn't hold up in my opinion. And is government is not like a police officer shooting an unarmed person somewhere that just whether for good reasons or bad reasons, because sometimes unarmed people are driving cars and so they're armed with a car, or sometimes it's a mistake, or sometimes it's just bad policemen. But this is a planned assassination. It's an intolerable situation. So that then moves a bunch of right-wing generals to stage a coup against this government. And so, yes, we can point both sides. What about isms? Both sides, yeah, it isn't clean. There's no side. There may be individuals, but there's no side that has 100% clean hands, 100% white hat. I'm not trying to say that one little bit. 7 kills, Steely. Okay, I'm not quite sure what that's referring to. Sorry. So they want to do a coup, or they attempt a coup against the government, because the government, like Saturn, the revolution, devours its children. You're talking the Titan Saturn wanting to devour his children. Yes, and so that's even within the left wing. That sort of happens a bit later in the Spanish Civil War sense, because early on it's Popular Front winning support from all of the left, not just hardcore left. See, Lone Wanderer, I know a lot of culture and history and whatnot. I'm not 100% educated and remember all of the details of all of the stuff, but yes, leftists eat themselves, but we're also talking about the left going after the right. So the right stages a coup. And I think at that point of governmental assassinations, in a system that is not free, fair, and well governed, in, shall we say, the American, Anglo-British experience, it isn't quite as stable a situation like that, I think, is a legitimate action by the right. Whether they should have done it or not, the question comes down to is, would the Popular Front government not kill off more people? One. And two, if the right could have won elections, I don't know if, as in got enough popular vote to win elections, would the left have allowed the system to swing the other way and put the right wing in charge of it? Or whether through shenanigans at the voting box, oh no, we counted all the votes. We stopped counting when we won and didn't count the other pile of votes that might make us lose. Or we invalidate this election because of whatever. Would they have allowed, or would they have continued to march down a eventual Stalinist path, of one party rule, including eating other leftists that aren't quite fully in on the revolution? But would they have allowed the swing to happen? If you truly believe, either looking back on it or looking at the time, truly believed that in whenever the next election, there was going to be a reasonable chance, one that was like, well, hey, if enough people agree that the government is out of control, they'll vote the other side in. Now, whether the people would agree or not, that's another question. We can talk about propaganda and electioneering. But would there, whether it's totally free and fair, but would there have been an election that would have allowed the right to redress issues, whether regionally or nationally or whatever? If you either during because one you have to put yourself in the viewpoint of the people at the time, because you don't necessarily know what would have happened later on, or if you political sciencey, I have a degree in political science. I don't believe there's I have a degree in something I don't believe exists. It's not, people say, I don't believe in guns. Yeah, they believe guns exist. They see guns. They just don't believe in the use of them. I don't believe that there is a science called political science. Science is a hard thing. Politics is an art form. We can talk about sociology and mass sociology, mass psychiatry, all that stuff that is somewhat sciencey, but politics is an art form. Like I say, politics is perception. So if you have perception that the government is evil and you have perception that the opposition is good, you can have the opposition win whether those facts are correct or not. So I don't believe in science in politics, though I have a degree in political science from a university. But just because they wouldn't give me a degree in the art of politics. But so I do have a background in this formal education, not just read a couple of books once. If looking back at it, because we can't analyze it still looking back at it, and if you believe that there was a reasonable chance for the right to be heard, then the Spanish Civil War is wrong, because all of the death and the violence, if that could be avoided and just have the right come into power and then the right appoint the policemen that just go after the bad guys who actually did the murdering and whatnot under the leftist regime and put those guys in jail or execute them or whatever. Just those guys, not the union worker or the politician who thought he was voting for, social justice, but, was not for, or actively involved in the murdering of the enemies. But, if you judge that it is just, if that was a reasonable expectation to have, then the Spanish Civil War is wrong. But if, as I do, because I know who was involved, at least politically, parties kind of thing, that the radicals were not going to allow the moderates to be in power in the end, even on the left. They would, like Lone Wanderer says, they would eat themselves eventually. And we do see, I don't know how much prior to the start of the Spanish Civil War, but we do see very quickly in the Spanish Civil War, along with Soviet arms being dumped into Spain, we see Soviet operatives. And Soviet operatives, by 1936, I would say, by July 1936, Soviet operatives have, through assassination and intimidation, but also assassination heavily, control every single communist party on the planet except one. Stalin is not concerned about he is a little bit, especially early on, worrying about, the whites of the Russian Civil War and their post kind of things like that. And we can talk about why do I do this on names? Picturing his face. Wrangel, General Wrangel, whether he would died by assassination or whatnot, and I don't know. And as being he's killed, but as being a Soviet plot and whatnot, probably, but or just disgruntled people or something. I don't know, but Stalin isn't so much worried about downgrading monarchists around the world or liberal Democrats or even moderate socialists. He is worried about getting control of every single communist party everywhere. There's one party he does not. Does anybody in chat know the one political party, and you've heard of it, so it isn't some sort of obscure little thing in some corner of the world? Well, not terribly. One communist party that he does not control. I was wondering if Lone Wanderer or folk in chat know who the one party Communist Party Stalin does not control. So he gets control of all of the communist parties. I'm giving them a little bit of time to think. I don't know if they're Googling or trying to think. That we definitely see during the Spanish Civil War a constant erosion to at some points a direct level of assassination of particular prominent leftist. Yep, Lone Wanderer guessed, because he has a question mark, the Chinese Communist Party. That is it. Stalin, Mao's Chinese Communist Party, especially but even before the Long March, he does not have any control over it, to the point that Stalin openly aligns himself with another revolutionary party, this Chinese Nationalist Party, which was a revolutionary party started by Sun Yat-sen, but at the time under Chiang Kai-shek's control, to the point that he's giving military aid, including aircraft and pilots, Soviet pilots, to fly, mostly against the Japanese, but also against the communists in China. And he believes that at the time, before World War II, that the nationalists have the greatest chance of winning, and so he wants to ally with the nationalists. A revolutionary, somewhat anti-Western, especially in the 1920s. They're very much anti-Western. Combination of reality and moderation of ideology. They're not like happy with the Western settlements in, where the extra governmental territoriality is in China, but they're more, again, somewhat moderation of ideology and somewhat of reality is hitting them. The idea of Western big business being in China is no longer the thing that they got to destroy or get rid of. Foreign missionaries, which they're killing, early on in the 20s. By the 30s, they're more, again, they want to get rid of direct control, but they're no longer like, oh, the West is evil. It's more like you got to live with them. So, and it's only post World War II does Stalin help the Chinese Communist parties, and at first it is only giving over all the captured Chinese equipment that they get from invading primarily Manchuria and parts of Korea and whatnot. They just in bulk give that to the Communist Chinese Party. Mostly they're doing that is because they don't want it, and two, it sort of like doesn't show that openly that Stalin is supporting them because, well, they just captured this stuff off the Japanese, of course. The tanks and the aircraft and the rifles and the machine guns and whatever. They just captured that from the Japanese. No, they got it from Stalin. But yeah, so he controls all of the parties. So I will get to playing the game here shortly, but this is, I guess, my talk on, and my other talk, another talk on the Spanish Civil War. Is eventual continued radicalization of the Spanish Republicans. I don't know the Spanish Republican Constitution, what it said versus how they acted, but they acted like a Popular Front leftist organization that was moving more and more radical. And when I say moving more and more radical, I don't mean like, oh, hey, workers' rights, no dying on the fact, safety for workers. No. It's like, oh, hey, there's a bunch of nuns over there. Let's go kill them all. Well, because they're nuns. Well, they support the church. Yeah, well, let's go. And this is happening prior to the start of the Spanish Civil War. So they're, just like going in and, having a little murder party with nuns. And I don't mean just like one or two that are found wandering alone at night in the city. I'm talking like going into their monastery, or nunnery or whatever, and killing them all. So this, and now, of course, the moderate socialist politician in Madrid or Valencia or something condemns this entirely, and this is inappropriate. But I'm still supporting the National Front that's the communists that maybe not individuals said that, yeah, I'm the one that murdered these people, but yeah, no, they're because they write on the wall, in blood or something, this is done by the whatever leftist reactionary or leftist action group or something. And, well, yeah, and we're voting for them. And, so yeah, they continue to support the violence. When you stay in a coalition, and again, to jump to modern politics, when you vote for a party that is doing radical things, when you still have laws that will not allow a child to get a tattoo, but you allow people of authority to give them drugs and possibly surgery without parents' consent. Now, they can't get a tattoo, but they can certainly have a surgery without parents' consent because the parents are reactionary and anti-trans? What? Okay, now, a lot of, maybe someone watching here moderate Democrats. No, I'm not for that. But you still freaking vote for the politicians who give those organizations money and power. So you're for it, even if you want to claim you're against it. You still stay on that side. Because other side bad, my side good. Well, so you still support it. Okay. So to get back to Spain. So the coup fails. Some of the army, and trust me, 500 soldiers in a barracks, it doesn't matter if 100 of them are monarchists. They're all going to support what they think the majority of those guys in the barracks support, because they know they're going to be shot if they don't. And so they're going to parrot the Republican, songs and sayings and whatnot. And they're soldiers, and it's discipline, and it's drummed into them. And they know that to disobey the military is a death sentence, meaning you'll be shot. Cowardice on the battlefield, running away, or traitors, you'll be shot. So I'm not saying most of the soldiers in some areas were pro-Republican or pro-nationalist. It comes down to the officers and the structure, and maybe the majority of the people in certain barracks and different things. Some of the army goes to the Republic, but I would say a slight majority, again, I'm just trying to remember from the stuff, goes towards the national side. But what the hell the Spanish army's done? Huh? Wasn't in World War One. It wasn't terribly well equipped. Hasn't done much. Except down here. There was the Rift War, and the French were also sort of fighting various elements here. Some of it I would put in sort of the same lump, and some of it sort of separate. But there's various Franco and Spanish, and I mean Franco is in French and Spanish, actions against various Arab groups. There was one mining type rebellion or something that Franco's the one that puts it down, again with troops from down here. Some of them are Spanish Moroccans, as in Arabs that are, don't know how much Spanish they spoke. They probably spoke a little bit, but were, I don't know, if you will, collaborationist troops with the Spanish government, but pretty hard troops, and units that they were mostly down here. This is the army that's actually fought anything hard that are really existing. This army up here is soft. Didn't go through World War One. Isn't terribly modern. I mean, sure, they got nice Mauser rifles and, nice little pistols, but it's not a very modern army. And somehow, all of the trade unions, workers' unions, political party people, all get, hey, free, here's guns. Just hand out rifles of all sorts. There's lots of them. I don't know if that would just account for the standard reserves that the army has and the police have, or whether they were sort of preparing for the revolution prior to it. But very quickly, there's lots of militia-type units that spring up that are well-armed, meaning they're not countrymen who have, random bolt-action rifles for shooting coyotes or shotguns for shooting birds or whatever the country folk might have for necessary rifles that are, civilian purchased and of all different sorts. No, these are all, coming out of armories and whatnot. So things aren't going well early on in the Spanish Civil War because first the coup fails and then the Civil War breaks out. So, like I say, Franco, who is outside of this, Mola is the general who's mainly running the Spanish coup and Now he dies, I think, in a plane accident or something like that. I'm not sure on that, but he's sort of the main general running. But Franco is sort of known for being successful down here. So he is popular with his army. Well, Germany supplies, once the war is sort of broken out, and here we can see 25 days, Franco's stuck. Not in the Canaries. He's already, like I say, been liberated, but his army is stuck down here. Germany, as I've been informed, commandeers a bunch of Lufthansa airplanes, flies them down, loads them up, and ferries multiple trips a bunch of his army. I don't know quite the percentage of it, but enough to stabilize the situation for the nationalists. Now, I want to say this. How do I say this? I think you can sort of kind of tell, and we're going to, when this is just going to be a Spanish Civil War talk, a special episode, of course, at this point. Like I've said earlier, stated clearly, no side are the complete white hats. No side are the good guys. And it very well may be coming down to the least bad guys. Whether you're emotionally, and some people, and I'm looking at you, Ari, and maybe some others, are emotionally on the side of, Catholic revisionism and the church and all that. Okay, great, but still your side does bad things. Now, sabotage was suspected in Jose Suriardo's death. Maybe that's who I was thinking. Oh, well, I don't remember all the Spanish generals, and it very well could be. And there's all kinds of stuff going on. Like I say, you can emotionally be for various reasons. One of the guys I follow on Twitter, because he does one of the sort of Twitter historians that posts, short articles with some stuff, nice photos that I may end up using, whether if I ever get back to modding and making events, or if somebody wants to ever pay me to make a DLC type thing for some of these things. I do collect this stuff, as well as for just possible thumbnails and my own knowledge. He seems to have a very pro-Republican viewpoint. And I just, and I don't know this guy from anybody. I just follow him on Twitter and like some of the stuff that he's posting. I know there's a lot of people, and a lot of people in Spain that, have ancestors on one side or the other of the factions, and so that's some of the reasons they draw up on it. But because we see partially, we see a constant during the Spanish Civil War, even as it's, in my opinion, it should be clear to anybody that you're losing. Now, maybe you're hoping that, we're losing. Well, maybe they'll have the French and the English or the Russians actually send Russian divisions. They never send Russian divisions, even though we'll see them here in the game. They're allowed to in the game, but they never did. They sent advisors and trainers, as far as I know. Oh, and pilots, a lot of pilots, flying the aircraft, and a lot of equipment. But to my knowledge, there is no Russian army or Soviet army made up of Russians fighting in the Spanish Civil War. There are open Italian armies wearing Italian uniforms fighting in the Spanish Civil War. Yes, they do show up. But even as the war is being lost, maybe they're, again, hoping for fighting on for another few days, weeks, months, an extra year to hope for, international intervention to change the thing. Because eventually a lot of them, flee across the border of the Pyrenees. I mean, tens of thousands flee across the border of the Pyrenees, and other ways of if you're realizing you're losing and to go. But as time goes on, more and more Soviet control. And one of the books which I've read is historical fiction, but I think it's good overall history, meaning a good historical fiction writer knows history well, and he just places his, unhistorical characters that are sort of viewpoint characters to look at the history, if you will. And he talks about some of the stuff as the way the Soviets were gaining control. the Soviets were bringing in the majority of weaponry into Spain. I say the majority for the Republicans. Little bit. The Germans also supply the nationalists with weapons and munitions. Weapons are the things that guns that you shoot, whether artillery pieces or rifles. Munitions are the things that come out of them, just to sort of define the two. The bullets, the artillery shells. The Germans are supplying a lot of guns and munitions to the nationalists. It's sort of done through Goering. It's done by a friend of Goering's. That Goering and this guy set up this company to have eventually 3 ships that are going back and forth between Germany and nationalist Spain. And this is going so well. And we may talk a little bit more about this, but this is going so well. Goering and this guy decide, there's a lot of money to be made in this. They buy 3 more ships because there's a lot of money to be made in this. And the reason they need 3 more ships, they need different ships. Can't use the same ships because they start selling guns and munitions to the Republicans too. 3 more ships. So they're eventually, I think, delivering about as much guns and munitions to both sides. I don't quite know exactly the tonnage that they're delivering, but they're delivering to both sides. And there's 3 ships, and again, they might not all be exact same tonnage or but they're going basically from, and I don't know, what ports they may have to go travel a little bit longer to get into Republican territories than nationalist territories. Now, one of the reasons that it is so successful for the Germans to smuggle in is because there is an international blockade around Spain to stop arms from coming into Spain. As you might expect, the British and the French are part of the international blockade of that. Oh, Germany is also part of the international blockade. And was it the Deutschland? One of them is actually bombed by Republican aircraft while on the neutrality patrol. So they're part of, the Germans are part of the, don't send arms to Spain, either side. Don't send it to them. So the Germans are quite aware of where everybody's ships are because they, coordinate, who's watching what coast when. And so when, the Germans are out watching, along here and don't happen to see that freighter going right, we don't see any freighter going into the port there. So yeah, the Germans are part of the neutrality patrols, and they do have, and in that the ship is bombed, and there's 12 German sailors killed at the thing. So they're part of the neutrality patrol, and so that way they can keep track and send in their stuff. I don't know quite how the Soviets are doing their system. I just don't know. It's not. I know they are sending lots of equipment in, but I do know that the Germans are part of the neutrality patrol, which definitely helps them signal when the coast is clear to get the ships in and out, and not be searched. Because it's not illegal for ships to go in and out of Spain. Because hey, food relief. They're getting food and money for food from all over the world, whether the money goes for the food or goes to arms or goes to the local communist parties, that never make it to Spain. There's all kinds of raising money and then definitely buying and delivering food. Mostly, I would say, to the Republicans, but so they're definitely, so if you show up and the international blockade stops you and you got a ship full of wheat or something or whatever, yeah, fine, go ahead into port, or medical supplies, Do they look 2 layers down in the crates to see below the medical supplies? The AK-47s? Yeah, I know they didn't have AK-47s, but supplying the nationalists. Now, but as time goes on, one of the ways that the Stalinist people get control is they give most of the weapons of theirs that coming into the Stalinist regime to units that they like, and most of the munitions to units that they like, that are deemed as being loyal to the Stalinist faction. Because there are Trotskyites, that are anti-Stalinist but are communist, and then there are, syndicalists and anarchists and social democrats and socialists, militias, and all these different types of factions fighting in the war. But especially as the war is going on, overwhelmingly, most of the good equipment is coming and going to what the Chetka, the pre-KGB people are thinking of the most loyal units. And so when you're a young man or young woman, in the case of the Spanish Civil War, there were a fair number of women fighting, you're thinking about either you're part of a unit or you're thinking about joining a unit. Are you going to go join those guys sitting over there that have a mishmash of rifles and you want to join us? Great. And you get, well, where's my rifle? Well, we don't have enough for you. Well, but when one of us are killed, you can take our rifle. Oh, okay. Yeah. We each got 10 rounds. Well, Sam over there, or Miguel, he has 12 rounds for his rifle, but we all have 10 rounds for our rifle. Are you going to go join that? Or are you going to go join this other group there that, their uniforms are dirty, but they're not all torn up, and they all look the same uniforms because they got better uniforms. And they all got the same rifles. They actually have some machine guns. And everybody has full rifle, ammo pouches. And the machine guns has lots of ammo crates standing around them. And they'll hand you a rifle right when you show up, and your ammo for it, and a new uniform to fit in with the crowd. Which one are you going to join? And when they also, the other way to get rid of the other militia units is, and it's well documented that they did this, that they demanded near suicidal, and eventually, because they kept demanding it, become more and more suicidal, demand that these non-Stalinist units do a lot of the most dangerous assaults, where the units that are more loyal to Stalin are held in reserve until the enemy is breaking, and then they attack. Then they push in, enough that, you've worn the enemy down, and the Stalinist unit's going to take some casualties. It's not like the battle's over, but it's at the critical moment, and we think we're going to win. So then they send in the good unit to hardly take any damage, so that they are sometimes by assassination, but I don't think mostly. It's mostly just sending the non-loyalist units, or to Stalin that we're talking about, to die in heavier numbers and trying to recruit up more. So as the time goes on, more and more people are supporting the Stalinist units and Stalin. Tesla makes a good deal of money on carbon offsets. Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of government things. Half the reason to play Black Ice is good NATO counters. Yes, these are definitely pretty good counters. I totally agree with that, Nate. Totally agree that they're doing good there. You tell you're sort of catching up on some of the chat. But yeah, it's great to have you here, Nate. So this is what is going on in Spain. So when you say nationalist versus Republican, that's the two titles that they have. What I believe is the natural development would have been if the Republicans had been able to win the war. And I think it's a fairly close thing if you don't have the Condor Legion. Now, the Condor Legion was just pilots. Yes, we do get to put in this game 2 divisions of ground troops. Germany had, at any one time, it was thought, about 300 ground non-Air Force type, not ground crews, but ground soldiers, that Berlin was constantly complaining, constantly telling them not to go into combat. About 300 soldiers that were meant to be trainers. Now, basically what it ends up being, and von Thoma is leading it, is a unit that's sort of commanded by Germans, not necessarily always German officers. German NCO types have a lot more command authorities than in most armies to this day. One of the Team G members, a member of Team G, Oh yeah, like you say, 10 factions. It depends on how you divide it up, but definitely, Nate. Um, and no, I don't know the names and how to divide all the factions up, but there's Carlists that are monarchists, and we'll get to some of that in a moment. But Team G member, who's current serving in the German military, their NCOs, or the particularly senior NCOs, have a lot more command authority than, say, in the American military. We jump to the officers a little more quickly for certain levels of command decision. So in the German army, NCOs have a lot more authority. So it's sort of like, in reality, for that is more like German-led. The 88, the big, flak 88s, the flak 18s, the model that would have been using at that point. The big 88 millimeter guns that are used as anti-tank guns. On or near the front line, shooting at enemy anti-tanks. They're probably more German commanded and trained up, with Spanish trained up crews that are to, whatever decent standard. I don't know if probably not all German units are equally trained. So, up to some level of German training. And the tanks are mostly crewed by Spanish crews, but definitely there are quote unquote German observers to see how well the tactics that they're training their soldiers to go on and leading the unit. So there's a lot of, but only about 300 or so German ground personnel. I don't know how many pilots at any one time. Now this is over multiple years, and they rotate through people. So there's a lot more people, and there's coming and going, both the air and the ground. Where Italy basically sends in 3 divisions. Maybe it's sort of 2 divisions and a brigade. I don't know. But they send in actual Italian army units, not fascist militia, not the Germans are wearing some sort of tan local uniforms with no German symbols on them, trying not to look like Germans. The Italians are wearing Italian uniforms, flying Italian flags, driving Italian trucks, driving Italian tankettes, doing everything. Yeah, dudes, we're Italians, we're fighting in this. So without some of that direct support, and trust me, those 3 divisions are very effective in this game. How are 88s implemented in BS Hoi 4? They're heavy. Well, they are implemented here as a flat gun here. We can see anti-aircraft long calibers. So they are a vehicle. It has defense, breakthrough a little bit, hard attack, which kills tanks of 7, air attack of 11. So it is a heavy, it is a dual purpose gun here. Again, for those of you who don't know why 18. That was to sort of go like, hey, yeah, flak 18s, yeah, they were originally, Mauser 18s, Lisch field howitzers, because that's light field howitzer, 18s, yeah, because these were all done as like, yeah, these were designs and whatnot that, yeah, we had done in 1918, we were getting ready to put them into implementation, but the war stopped. So it was sort of a... it's why 18 is used so much for all the early versions of everything. Maybe not everything, but so many things. Because they sort of, even though they were designed in the 1930s or the 20s or whatever, just to sort of a Versailles Treaty, whatnots. And so the Flak 36 is just a slightly, and sometimes improvement is not improvement to function, but improvement to cheaper manufacture, especially when you're talking about a lot of German howitzers. There's only one change in the German, I went and looked this up, of the Germans, we're not talking captured equipment, of the Germans, there's only one change, and we're not talking about the 1945 Czech improvement, but there's only one change in the German production line from 1936 until the end of the war in their 105 millimeter howitzers. That's an improvement that has a bit higher charge that makes you shoot a little bit longer range. All the other improvements are improvements either to weight, so easier to move around, or mostly simplification of manufacturing. So where and I complained about this way back when Hearts of Iron was still in development, some of the stuff doesn't make you fight any better. Most of it doesn't. It just makes it you produce more of them. And so I don't know the difference right offhand between the Flak 18 and the Flak 36. I believe they're both the same chambering, shoot the same ammo, meaning it's just modifications in either production or whatnot. So, and I do know there is a more powerful 88 millimeter coming, but that isn't. Tankettes are really cool. Too bad they weren't a major war in the 1940s. Well, as I was saying live, tankettes are good. Just they don't replace tanks. They're light infantry, light mobile machine guns to suppress enemy. Because we can argue the British did have, I would call a tankette in the Mark 6 light tank. It has a 50 caliber machine gun on it. Yeah, few are made with a 13 millimeter thingy on it, machine gun, but most are made with a 50 caliber. But I would argue to a point. It's arguable. The Bren gun carrier, or later called the universal carrier, that's sort of a tankette. Some of them had, the Vickers machine guns officially mounted on them, and others just simply with the Bren gun and armored thing. They're sort of little tankettes running around the battlefield that are designed to either shoot the Bren gun from the vehicle or deploy the Bren gun and team carrying ammo, deploy it in a under armor to a position to dominate the enemy. Deployed from the vehicle, so it's sort of a dismountable tankette, and that's used to the end of the war. The Bren gun carrier or universal carrier, but as a deployable, machine gun squad group fighting either from the carrier or fighting as a deployed unit. And so I would argue that that's a unique but a tankette, and not just a so that's to the end of 45. Britain and the Commonwealth forces and their tactical doctrine continues with the tankette, in my opinion, and whatnot. So tankettes are cool, yes. It's just when you try to make tankettes be tanks, that's where you get the real problem with them. Not the idea of, even in a modern sense, of air transportable little light armored vehicles that deploy a like a 50 caliber or whatever sort of machine gun airborne landing naval landing kind of thing that happen. Tankettes are really cool, and I like them, and have their place. So I see the Republican side not as, if they won, that that would be good for Spain, because I see Stalinism coming if they had won. Now on the nationalist side, and this is maybe very much the lesser of evils, but this puts me, like I was saying, compared to the author, sort of historian, seems to be pro-Republican. This puts me pro-nationalist, and if I got to choose between these two factions, I choose the nationalist. Franco, and the left wants to this day, Ronald Reagan's a fascist. Oh, you mean small government, liberty-minded president is a fascist? Well, you discredit I no longer trust when you call somebody a fascist, because you call libertarians fascist. You call everybody fascist. So that becomes meaningless. I have to look for people that demonstratedly behave in a fascist manner or call themselves fascists. Franco does neither. He never calls himself a fascist, as far as I know. And he doesn't behave in a fascist manner, though he does have fascist phalangists, that's the Spanish version of it, of the party, in his government. He is a nationalist. He is a right-wing coalition leader, which includes fascists. Fascists never, as I would consider it, come to power in Spain. They have a lot of influence. I'm forgetting during the World War II era. I'm picturing his face, just not remembering his name. foreign minister for Spain is a fascist, open fascist, and so he does have them at a high level in government, and they're definitely around in Spain, but we don't see fascism implemented in Spain. It is a nationalism, and there's you have maybe fascistic elements there, and they do have a lot of influence, but they're not in charge. And there is a lot to criticize the nationalists for during the Spanish Civil War. After the Spanish Civil War, they killed Jose Antonio Primo de Rivera. I don't know who they are, and without a better hint as to who that is, you've lost me again. Lone Wanderer. I may have heard of him, I'm just not remembering. And so what redeems, ultimately, for me, the nationalist / Franco, because it is very much tied with Franco eventually, is one, he keeps Spain out of World War II. He doesn't, when Hitler demands things, mostly my understanding, the answer is, sure, as soon as you give me these unachievable requirements, I'll do that. Basically, hey, as soon as you send me enough food, because there's a food shortage in Spain, and that's why some of the Spanish that are held prisoners after the Spanish Civil War, the Republicans, are not doing well in their camps. And whether the people should be in camps or not, well, there is punishment for your crimes, whether you want to call it a prison or a camp. And would they, if released, would they likely go back to committing violence or not? Comes down. Okay, he was Falange, okay, a syndicalist, Spanish politician who founded the Falange Española. Okay, right. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I know this stuff on sort of, okay, and Nate is also helping out too, founder of the Falange, shot in prison, I think, by the assault group, but might have been different militia. Yes. And so, yeah, no, the left is being, in my opinion, now maybe it's the propaganda that I get, but often it's like leftists go in, massacre either a bunch of nuns, a bunch of priests, a bunch of landowners. Nationalists come in onto the scene, see all the dead bodies, the blood, maybe a few days old, but, the blood around. And then these nationalists are like, whether they're monarchists, fascists, just conservatives, whatever you might want to say, see all these dead women and children or old men or whatever. And then they go out, sometimes when they're actually capturing units either known or suspected to commit these crimes, or other people. Generally, it seems to be they're going after the militia types, not just random civilians, but then they're going in and getting some of these people and rounding them up and killing them, more as a reaction than as a actual setup. So, but yeah, they did bad things too. So Franco keeps Spain out of World War II by not pissing off Hitler enough that Hitler wants to invade, and by also sort of moderating his radical fascists by, oh yeah, you want to go fight communism? Yeah, go ahead. Have fun. Blue Division, fascist, all volunteers. Yeah, you only volunteer can get to go. Yeah, go. Have fun killing the commies. And of course, a bunch of them die doing that. Eventually, they're withdrawn with just a small diehard group that doesn't want to go back to keep fighting the commies, because eventually there's enough pressure from primarily the U.S., but the Western allies, and realizing at that point, Franco's going, yeah, the Germans are going to lose this thing. So yeah, let's pull these guys out. We don't want to anger the winners. So he pulls them out. But he largely keeps Spain out of World War II, which means a lot less deaths, because in my opinion, even though like I was saying early in this video, the nationalists do launch a coup, but it is only reaction to killings by in my opinion, unlawful killings by the government. And so it's a reaction. Whether they should have or not, I discussed, but it's a reaction. Franco does not start the coup, does not start the Civil War. They both happen without his involvement, the starting of them. It is only him being brought in with his Army of Africa, as it's called, does he actively enter the scene. So he, in my opinion, is doing his best to end the war by winning the war, not by prolonging the war, not by whatever. It's as much as within the realms of existence, and I'm sure there's massacres. I'm not trying to say there weren't, but is just trying to win the war to bring peace to Spain. And yes, for the nationalist side, Hitler hated Franco so much he said that he had rather had the Republicans accepted Stalin forced his hand in the Spanish Civil War. Yeah, you know, at some point, again, on German support, we may talk about this later on a bit when I'm actually playing out, because we will send a German expeditionary force. To pay for all the German quote-unquote aid, it's mostly paid for, to pay for it, the Franco's government, and Franco approves this at the time, sets up a company that sells raw materials, does sell some percentage of it, a significant percentage, but the majority of it is sold to Germany at a very good rate for the Germans. So the Germans are getting a deal. You know, I'm not saying they're getting it for free. They're not. They're having to pay real money. But all that money is then being spent on weapons from Germans' factories. So the Germans are getting a good deal. After, I don't know what year, whether it's like 37 or 38, I'm thinking 38. I remember I read a really nice long article. Franco sort of like, you know, hey, yeah, we've now established ourselves, and there's other people that'll buy these raw materials at a better price. You know, it's, not so much with Portugal and Salazar, who hates. Salazar is another nationalist leader, in my opinion, not a fascist. His Nuevo State is much more nationalist. It has fascistic elements in it, definitely. But he hates Hitler so much, he actually writes and publishes, actively publishes an anti-Hitler book. So he hates Hitler enough that he writes an anti-Hitler book, like in the 30s. Yeah, I don't know exact year, but I do. It's in my mod. I knew at one point, but I don't know right off there. Didn't Hitler send Canaris to Spain to say, oh, yes, oh, yeah. Canaris makes at least one trip to, and if not more, one trip down to Spain during the Spanish Civil War. He is actively involved in the Spanish Civil War on one level or another. But so with back to these raw materials. So Franco realizes, yes, nationalist Spain is somewhat of a pariah, but he's got buyers for this raw materials or refined materials or whatever. And like when the Germans are buying it, it's so much that when the nationalists take a new factory or whatever, Germans are brought in immediately to help reorganize the factory, get the workers going, get it reorganized. So the Germans have their fingers deep into this, and I forget the name of the corporation that they set up to do this. Have it deep into control of whoever's locally controlling it. They're still locally, I guess, controlling it, owning it, but it's organized up for the Germans. And the Germans, again, are paying for these resources, but at a very good rate. Franco's going, God, I could get more money for my war effort by selling this stuff. Open market might not be quite the right term, but to other places that are willing to buy it. And the German answer, I don't know if specifically from Hitler or not, is, oh, yeah, sure, you can do that if you want. Who's going to sell you arms? And Franco goes, oh, okay. And so stops that. Because because the Germans say, yeah, you may have somebody who is willing to buy your copper or your tungsten or whatever it is you're selling us at a better price. We're not selling you arms because we want, US dollars or British pounds or whatever the currency you might give us. We're just not going to sell you arms, and nobody else is at any volume. Yeah, Italy is sending Carcano rifles. You do see Carcano rifles in nationalist hands. They are sending in some of that stuff, but it's not nearly the scale that Germany is with Mauser rifles, including manufacturing Mauser rifles and 7mm Mauser for Spain. So, and sending a lot of 7mm ammunition to Spain as well. Lots of, shiploads of it. So, and eventually Franco does get the arms manufacturing area up here and turns it to his good use, manufacturing arms and munitions. But at first it's in Republican hands. So, this is some of the early stages with whether it's Hitler directly or the nationalists or the national leaders of the Nazi Party have frictions with Franco over that. So it's never with Germany here's a lot of freebies. I'm not saying that everything costs lots of money that they were selling or giving, and definitely like the Condor Legion is very much looked at by the Luftwaffe as an experimental field operation. And so they wanted to do that, but it is still very much Spain has to pay for it. Leftist in police uniform shot leader of opposition. Yeah, Trotsky went to Spain. Jose Antonio Primo wrote Franco from his prison asking him to raise arms specifically because of Trotsky. Yeah, and so there's a lot of hardcore leftists, and I believe that in the end they would have been the ones in charge. It would not have been Republic in Spain. It would have been People's Republic of Spain, if you will. The Cold War nomenclature difference there. So Franco ends the war, keeps Spain out. I know I'm recapitulating it. Keeps Spain out of World War II, not having to die. And yes, he stays on as dictator until his death. But what does he do? He sets it up so that there is a constitutional monarchy. Now, he'd probably like it more right-wing than it is currently in Spain. But he sets it up to bring the monarch back. Not because he wants, godly rule of an absolute monarch of Catholic whatever. No. What he wants is this is maybe a bit of my projection on it, but this is what I think he wants to have. It's like what American, again, we can talk about the shift to the radical left with segments of American society, but is the enshrinement of our Constitution as not holy as in God, but holy as in this is our founding document. This is our governing, ruling document. It needs to be. We can modify it, but everything, unless it's modified, has to be within the Constitution. Well, the idea that if you have a monarch who is there and has even just limited power, but can keep the pendulum of shift between right and left, if you will, from swinging too far. So it can move to the left. It can move to the right. Maybe further to the left than Franco would like, I'm sure. But it can move, it can swing, but it can only swing so far because of the monarchy, because of the state he sets up. Instead of trying to have his, a nationalist, I know there is a brief attempt at some sort of loony fascist coup after Franco dies, but that's just some sort of looniness. But he sets it up so that there is a transition that, Franco's moving, Spain in towards NATO and towards a Western alliance, which he knows that by doing so, he is moving it into a more liberal democratic society organization, situation, instead of trying to be, a Pinochet or some other right-wing, the Shah of Iran or the current kings of Saudi Arabia who are, keeping it as a monarchy and are not moving. He knows by doing all of what he's doing, even while he's alive, that it is going to move into liberal Western society, generally speaking. But because of the Cold War, is still a thing, and because there's still a lot of Spanish communists, maybe a bunch still sitting over in France that are, sort of outlawed or whatnot, but that you still have the idea that he's not willing to give up control, and again, back to one of the things that I value is good governance. Now, gamer this or that or whatever, even Leighton Franco's. Yeah, I'm not saying Franco's a saint. I'm not saying he did everything the way I would want him to do it, even within the realities of Spain. Because there's realities of Spain at the time, and even controlling your own side to keep them from having death squads. You might have to be a little heavy-handed with the left and lock them up a bit more, because otherwise the right will get out, because one leftist will go shoot up a bunch of people, and then a bunch of rightists will want to go shoot up a bunch of other people in revenge. Well, and if you then go clamp down on the rightists, well, then they start, revolting against you. So to clamp down on the situation, he locks up people unfairly, I'm sure. I'm not saying, again, it's all right and roses. It's within the practical realities. I admire Franco for navigating that path. Notice I just said admire Franco for navigating that path within the realities of his situation. So again, I'm not advocating that Franco's rule is the best rule or he didn't do anything wrong. It's just liberal leads to socialism. No, it doesn't. Liberalism doesn't lead to socialism. Socialism and liberalism are diametrically opposed, Lone Wanderer. Socialism is collectivism. Liberalism is individualism. It is the collectivists that got in control of the American Democratic Party. It used to be a party, with some collectivists, but liberalists in it. Liberalism and socialism are diametrically opposed to each other. Liberalism is individualism. Socialism is collectivism. Socialism leads to communism, yes, but liberalism does not lead to. Abraham Lincoln does not lead to socialism, okay? Ronald Reagan does not lead to socialism. Margaret Thatcher does not lead to socialism. Yeah, Margaret Thatcher is a conservative politician, but in the sort of conservative, yes, British sense, in that she wants to denationalize the means of manufacturing, turning the means of manufacturing back to individual ownership, even if it's lots of individuals, corporations, stock companies, and not state-controlled, or state-owned means of production. So, yeah, so she is a liberal in that sense, even though she's a conservative British politician. But liberalism does not lead to socialism. But coalitions, see, this is what we have in America, to jump to America, whether it's America in the 50s, America in the 80s, America today. We have two fronts. Like, you go the left-wing front and the right-wing front. And I'm thinking like Popular Front here, in that it's a coalition of factions that sometimes have organizations within them, unions, particular, like on the right, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, that is a coalition of gun owners. In the olden days, some of those guys could be Democrats in certain states that were, a lot of especially they were all maybe also union members, but they were also NRA people. So it's, so some guys are gun ownerships. That's the main thing. Gun owners, yay. And most of the unions are on the left. So, you have coalitions of these things. They're not quite as ideologically party differentiate like we see in Europe, either in the 30s or today. But the American Republican Democratic parties are two coalition parties. They are, and this is what Europeans often find confusing about when they properly study American politics, they know this. But if they just sort of look at it from news reports, is what I'm talking about. They don't understand that whether it's even the modern Democratic Party and the modern Republican Party. Republican politicians are the most hated politicians because all the Democrats hate them and 2/3 of the Republicans hate them, but they're just less bad than from the Republican side's less bad than the Democrats. But yeah, trust me, most voters for the majority of the people that vote for Republicans do not like the politician they're voting for. They just dislike the other guy worse. So that is it. Liberalism emancipation from monarchy. Socialism emancipates from property. No, because you can have a monarchy. You can have a liberal monarchy. Liberalism and monarchy are not incompatible. Markets destroy the family feudal arrangements. The church. No. Liberalism is not a form of government. Okay, you can have a dictator. Somebody maybe like the Shah of Iran, setting up a socialist system, but he's a dictator who does not hold any elections, so he has no socialist party or something like that. Or maybe a good better example would be Saddam Hussein and his Ba'athist party or something that was somewhat socialistic. You can have a dictator that's socialist, and you can have a I'm not saying I can come up with a good example of it. Well, maybe we can look at either Britain or Japan. Modern day Japan is a monarchy that's a liberal monarchy. And Japan may be a very good example of a modern day liberal monarchy. Yeah, they have downgraded themselves publicly, at least. I don't know what they privately think, that they're no longer divine, but they're still a monarchy, and they're still, I think, hold overwhelming approval of the Japanese people. Now, of course, they're not running a lot of politics because they're sort of a liberal monarchy. It's like, hey, as long as you guys don't fuck up too much here in Japan, you do what you want. And if you start to fuck up, well, yeah, maybe we'll have to start, doing stuff. Whether it's just saying, oh, well, this policy is bad, or this kind of action is bad, whatever, if it isn't apparent already to the Japanese political body consciousness that something is bad, then the monarch may come in and have to say something. But yeah, monarchy in Japan is a liberal monarchy. Within its societal viewpoint, it's very liberal. So I'm disagreeing with the Lone Wanderer. You're mixing metaphors, as it were, mixing socialism. Now, socialism definitely, even communism to some degree, recognizes private ownership of what they would consider non-means of production on a limited scale. Meaning, you can maybe own a car, but you can't own three, communism. You can't be too greedy. And if you're presuming like a car or a motorcycle is not a means of production, yeah, you can own a car under communism. Actually try to own it and have it in your name and have your, they can't, unless there's an overwhelming need, some war, invasion or something, you get to own and use that car however you want to, again, within the speed limits and the traffic laws. And if you can afford to buy gas, how much gas can be bought with, or allotted ration to you or whatever, you can own a car under communism, even if communism worked the way they believe it could work, that there's enough gas and enough cars for everybody. Yeah, you can own a car, but you can't be greedy in that somehow you own 3 or 4 cars under communism. And communism is radical socialism, so collectively they own the means of production. Now, some socialists are sort of limited socialists. They believe certain industries or certain levels of means of production should be owned collectively, but you can have rich people that own some means of production. It varies on the socialist scale, but I agree with you that generally it goes. So you're mixing forms of government with, America has left Japan. I was actually reading about some of that last night. About 1956, I believe it was, the year in which America gives sovereignty back to Japan. And the Emperor Hirohito comes out and does say he has remorse. He uses the term remorse over World War II in a statement, and even though the Prime Minister says he shouldn't, he does. And that's when Japan gets its self-governance back. Japan is very, very, very happy with having the 7th Fleet stationed in Japan and having the U.S. carrier Ronald Reagan, because they're looking at the world and going, yeah, we need to arm up, but as one of the viewers said, and I don't think it's actually a real quote, but the Japanese Navy learned 3 lessons in World War II. Number 1, don't go to war with the USA. Number 2, don't go to war with the USA. And number 3, don't go to war with the USA. So Japan has learned, I think, this lesson that they're an island nation off a continent like Britain is, and that they probably should not ever try to hold large swathes of continental land. That is not going to benefit them in the long term. And that they need to, and because they're an island nation, they do not have access to scales of resources on the continental scale. And so they probably need to find another great naval power to help protect them. And America seems like one that probably won't devour them like, China might, or the Soviet Union or something might. So they're quite happy with their arrangement as that. And so I think, and I'm looking also at Japanese culture, because I do study that as well as other things. And Japanese are very collectivist compared to liberal Westerners. Culturally, I'm just saying culturally, they are very collectivist, not so much their government formed as in communists, but culturally, they're very collectivist thinking. And I think to a large part, the Japanese monarchy is just willing to let everyone figure everything out, so long as nothing goes too far off the rails, sort of that they're there. And so they don't need to do anything because they're not going too far off the rails. And I think that's the case. Regarding cars, only because they have to recognize reality, not because they want to. Well, I think even the ideological communist, if you get them outside of deep urban environments like countryside, but every countryside person to have a car or a truck, yeah, I think in their idealistical world that would never really happen, but everybody could have their own cars. I do think they would be, but the means of production, including the means of food production, are collectively held under communism. There's no pro and anti-private communist socialism. It is core part of property, as in with socialism, as in the means of production. You're absolutely right. It should core socialist beliefs, but you can look at Britain today. The Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, however much it exists, Lib Dems as they're called today, but the Liberal Party, and the Labour Party all agree that a certain level of socialism is good. Now, the Labour Party may want to renationalize British industry entirely. I don't, and it depends on maybe which. I don't think, I forget, whatever. All of them would think that. Some of them may think that. But they all agree that the healthcare industry, the means of production of healthcare, should be nationalized, should be owned by the government. All the hospitals should be government-run and owned hospitals. They believe that. So you can have socialists who can believe that only certain means of production be nationalized. But let me just say, let's say perfumes, and that includes male deodorants and whatever. But perfumes, if you wants to be a privately owned company, because, hey, if we all stink because the perfume companies charge too much for perfumes, we don't have to be French, but we could smell like the French if we want to, unbathed and unperfumed. We can smell French if we want to, but, or if prices become too much for, deodorants and perfumes, well, who the hell cares? But if prices for food or gasoline or what they would see as necessities go up too much, that's national. So you can get within a socialism, you can get a gradient. I know it leads ideologically to communism. I'm not arguing that point. But there are socialists who will believe that only what they see as essential industries for health and welfare or whatever, which could be farming, which could be, whatever, are nationalized. But luxury and other sorts of things, well, if they can survive on their own, heavily taxed, I'm sure, but if they can survive on their own, fine, they can be privately owned. You do have those kind of things. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up here, but countries are allies like Roman allies. Yeah, sort of. I know where you're talking about that. Japan, I mean to say Japan would be forced into a militaristic state to defend itself to prevent. Well, but Japan is right now on a massive buildup, national military buildup, equal to anything prior to World War II. They are right now in spending budgets, and people are wondering, well, where they're going to get all this money for. But they're spending money like it's 1937 or 1938, building up their military. They're militarizing themselves as fast as practical right now as we speak, Nate, with American approval, because it so far looks like they're not going to go on another conquering binge. It's more like they're even sort of did another apology tour just within the last month or so to Korea. The prime minister, I think last week or two, the Japanese prime minister was in Korea doing another apology and like, hey, can we get along in South Korea and Japan, do good alliance kind of thing. So they're going militarized right now. They're trying to get more and more weapons. Now they're also down here. Literally down sort of here. I know the map doesn't, there's a few islands here. 3 new U.S. Patriot batteries have been deployed within the last couple of months, maybe even more recently, but have been deployed down here that are U.S. operated. We're also deploying more batteries down here too. And Japan is building more missiles. They're also massively building missiles. A lot of interception missiles, to shoot down other missiles or planes. So yeah. So yeah, Japan, but I don't think within probably mine, and I don't know your age, your lifetime is going to go back on a militaristic conquest viewpoint. I do think they are going to re-enshrine, be a man, join the military type ethos is going to be pushed forward in Japan more, I do believe. But, remember the samurai spirit, remember whatever. I do think that is, but I don't think it's going to be on a conquest mode. And I do think it's going to be on we want to be allies with America because China be big and scary, and even Russia is still a bit of a problem. And yeah, I think they see this. But America is an unreliable ally because you can get somebody like a Ron Paul on the right or somebody on the left that just decides we don't care enough to intervene over Taiwan or over Okinawa or whatever, and we'll just withdraw. And that could happen in just a few years, that Japan could be left holding its own. I'm not saying it's likely to happen the next 5 or 10 years, but it's something that in the next 50 or 100 years, I think the Japanese are well enough aware that America could go isolationist again. And so they've got to arm up, but they would like to stay on the good side of the U.S. I do think, whatever they do. Yeah, I understand. I understand. But see, if you set up the collect lone wanderer I know you didn't say it's equal. No, I'm reading what you're saying. I'm saying is if you have the ethos of liberalism, you get Ronald Reagan, who was a member of the Democratic Party until he saw the Democratic Party moving too left. You get people, liberalism. The Liberal Party in America was the Republican Party under Abraham Lincoln. That was the Liberal Party. The Democrat Party at the time was the Conservative Party at the time. It was a more popular, a little bit more populist, definitely more paternalistic party, the Democrats, which may or may not be the case today. But but it was the Conservative Party under Lincoln's day, not just over the slavery issue, but other issues. The Liberal Party was the Republican Party. And so conservatives in America want to conserve liberalism. in individualism, as in proper liberalism, not as liberalism claim or collectivism using the liberalism label. And that's where I think people have gotten confused. Also on privatization. Even the Bolsheviks, yeah, absolutely. They had to revert because they realized communism, they couldn't make communism work. They tried. Hello, Ulad88. Will you ever try to play Japan in World Ablaze? I'm done with World Ablaze for the foreseeable future. I am just done with it. I have a video on that. Will I play Japan again? I definitely have older Japanese playthroughs. You can check those out. Will I play Japan again someday? Yes. Whether it's under Black Ice or some other mod, I don't know. But for now, World Ablaze I'm done with. And until they make major changes, I don't think they're likely to make the changes. But until they make major changes, I am not going back to World Ablaze. I just have too much disagreement with them. You get a Democrat, too, who becomes socialist. Well, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, the modern Democratic Party. So you're mixing modern politics up with the labels. Okay, well, guys, I think we've gotten a little bit too off topic for my talk on Spain, but we do want to relate it to the modern world. I want to thank Lone Wanderer, Uland88, Nate, let's go back up to the thing. Who else is still here? Folk may be still here. Thank you. Beam Slam, I don't know if you're still here. Thank you for hanging out with me. Arno, if you're still around, thank you. Ari, I think you've gone, but thank you. Sir Suspicious, thanks for your input. I think everybody who hung out with me, I especially want to thank my patrons, Tim, Strongarm, Niagro, Timothy, Sir Toyjet, Gary, Garrett, Marcus, and especially the Hoffmanator for your support over on Patreon. But everybody else, can you hit that like button or lick it if you like to lick it, and smash the subscribe button if you haven't already, and post a comment even if you are watching later or even if you just show up later. The Ruzen Cures, thank you so much for hanging out with me too. Yes, you're still here. Good. If when these videos get posted regularly, if you even just quickly drop in and hit that like button and post a comment, that would be helpful for the algorithms, even though you hung out and were in the original live chat. I do appreciate all of that. I will be back tomorrow playing War Thunder, hopefully with a few of the Team G members, maybe a few new people if you guys want to play with us. And I forget which game I'm playing. I will be streaming for Slitherine TV on Twitch Monday, and then I'll be back next week with more Hearts of Iron on Saturday, and of course videos in the meantime. So thank you all. Hope to see you soon.